Hi there, I am Courtney Brickner, owner of the Crafty Brick. Welcome to my class today, comparing sublimation to DTV. Now you might be wondering what DTV is. There's lots of DT things out there, DTG, DTF, DT. So I want to help clear some of the confusion. So DTV stands for direct to vinyl. So it's actually a paper that comes like this. So it makes it a little bit different from the DTF and the DTG because those actually come with the image already printed on the transfer paper that you're going to be getting. So you would upload an image and then they print it out for you. You can do some of them at home if you've got a DTG or DTF printer. And there's also just some hacks that you can also do at home. But today we're talking about DTV. So it's direct to vinyl. And that means you're actually going to use your regular inkjet printer and you're going to print on this paper. There's kind of a tint to the back, a little bluish tint to the back. The front is completely white. You're going to be printing on the front side. The back side is just the back underlayment of the paper. So you're not going to be printing on that part. And we're going to be comparing it to sublimation. So the difference between the two, there's a few differences. With the DTV, you do not have to have polyester fabric. You know, that's one of the things with sublimation, that in order for sublimation to work, it needs polyester fibers for the ink to adhere to. Because during the sublimation process, the ink turns into a gas and then it turns back into a solid. And when it comes back to that solid state, it adheres to the polyester fabric. It does not adhere to cotton. Therefore, you are not able to sublimate on cotton fabrics, which kind of limits you sometimes because some people don't like the feel of cotton or of polyester fabrics. So you're kind of stuck because if you want to use the sublimation method, you need polyester fabrics. That's why DTV is kind of a nice alternative because you can use any fabric to press on. And another nice thing is that you can actually use just an iron to use the DTV material, just your regular home iron. You don't have to have a heat press. So when you're comparing the two methods, you kind of need fewer supplies when working with the DTV material. So today what I want to do is just kind of compare the two methods, compare the supplies that you would need for each of them, and I'd like to show you the process that you would use for making both garments. I have a 100% polyester tee, and I also have a 100% cotton tee. So we're going to be using the DTV for the cotton tee, and we're going to be using the sublimation for the polyester tee. I would like to show you each way how to make these t-shirts with the design that I'm going to be sharing today. And then I'd also like to share the washability of each. So I'll be doing some wash testing, and then I'll head back to show you the results of that. So how about we get started and I will show you the two methods. Let's first talk about supplies that you'll need for both of these materials. With sublimation, the first thing you're going to need is a sublimation printer. These are both sublimation printers that I've got, the Sawgrass 500 and the Sawgrass 1000. You'd have to have a printer. In these printers, you have sublimation ink. There's also printers, like sometimes you can convert, some people have converted sublimation printers and you put sublimation ink into that particular printer, like this Epson. This one is not, but I have converted Epson printers in the past, so you can do that as well. But you need the printer, you need the ink, and then you also need sublimation paper. It's a specific paper that takes the ink that allows you to print them onto your garments. So those are very important first steps for sublimation. If you don't have a sublimation printer, the good thing is now that there are some products on the market that you can use for sublimation, and you don't need a printer to use them. You just need plain copy paper, and they've got markers, there's stamp pads, and there's also sublimation paint. So you can create some of your own designs and you don't have to have the printer. But in order to do sublimation, you have to have one of those things. Then you would also need to have a heat press. And the heat press is very important because in order for the sublimation process to work, it needs to come in contact with the heat so that that ink can turn into a gas and then turn back into the solid. So it needs that heat in order to make that process work. In addition to the heat, you're going to need heat tape so that you can put your design onto your blank and that it doesn't move. Because if you've got movement when you're doing sublimation, you come in counter with something that's called ghosting. And that's when your design kind of has like a blurry double vision. And that's because your paper moved when you were pressing it. So you need to have the heat transfer tape so that your design doesn't move. And then the last thing you need is blowout paper or butcher paper. You're going to put that on top of your paper. So you've got your garment, your paper, and then you've got your garment, your design with the paper, and then you've got your blowout paper on top. And that prevents ink leaking onto your press. You don't want to have ink that's lingering on your press because then it can go on to your next project, which I've had happen before and it's not a good thing. So use the blowout paper so that it protects your press from getting ink on it. Now let's talk about using DTV. You're going to need this DTV paper and you need an inkjet printer. You don't need any special printer in order to make this happen. You're going to print it directly from your regular printer with the regular ink on this paper. And then sometimes, depending on the design that you're using, if you've got one design that's like a one big piece and doesn't have like a lot of little letters, then you don't need the mask. But if you've got little letters that might, when you take off when you weed the design, you're going to have pieces that are not all together and you want to have the alignment right. So you would use a mask to put it on top and then you would press it on. And then the last thing you would need is an iron or a heat press. The good thing with the DTV is it does work with just a regular home iron, so that's very nice. And you might be wondering, how does the DTV compare to just like printable HTV? It is very similar. The difference is the material that the DTV is made with is actually really, really thin and really flexible. So when you've got it on a shirt, it doesn't feel like that thick kind of crinkly feeling that the printable HTV does sometimes. So this is a nice smooth material that just feels really good to the touch. So that's the difference between DTV and printable vinyl. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is I've got the side with a little bit of tinted blue on the back there. I'm putting that in my printer and I'm going to go ahead and print my design. You're gonna be making this the exact same way that you would with a print and cut design. So I'm going to print it out with my regular printer and then I will use my cutting machine to cut out the design. So the next thing I want to do is to print my design out on my sublimation printer. So I am going to send that over to my Sawgrass and then we will be ready to print that and we'll compare the two processes in order to make both the garments. So we've got our sublimation print done, and one thing I wanted to show you is just the vast difference in the print of both of the things. So the DTV looks very vibrant and just a beautiful color. The sublimation, not so much, but do not be concerned because that's just the way sublimation works. When it prints out, it is actually a very muted color of what you're going to get. When it comes in contact with the heat, that's when the magic happens and our dull picture that we printed out will become very vibrant and beautiful, especially if you're using 100% polyester material. It's going to be really bright. If you're using less than 100 polyester material, then it will still be bright, but it's the lower polyester count that you have in your garment, the less vibrant the image is going to be. So now we're going to go ahead, I'm going to cut this with my cutting machine because I've got the registration marks here and it is ready for the print and cut. So I did the print, it's ready for the cut. And then this is actually ready to be sublimated already. We don't need to do anything else to it. There's no weeding with sublimation. That's one really nice thing. You print it out and it's ready to make. This has another step, another couple steps that we need to do in order to make this project. Now that we've got our design printed, we want to go ahead and weed the excess material on our design. So that's another difference between the DTV and sublimation, because there is no weeding with sublimation. So we're going to go ahead and weed this, and because I am using a design that actually has multiple parts, if it just had one big piece, I wouldn't have to use a mask. But since I've got multiple pieces, I am going to be using a mask so that I can keep all these letters together. Let's see, get this part out. Sometimes some of the material might stick, but just be careful when you're taking it off so you don't tear the material. All right, we've got that. Now let's get the insides out. It weeds very nicely, so that is good. And the material is just so soft. I do love that about the DTV. Get out that middle of the E. Okay. Now we will apply the mask. I want to show you a little trick with the DTV. So you see we've got some of these letters that are kind of coming off of the backing. If they're kind of not flat and they're peeling up, that can be kind of hard to put the mask on because they're kind of like staticky and the mask like pulls them away from the paper. So a nice thing that you can do is you take your press, heat the bottom for just a few seconds. So you put the top down, get the bottom a little bit heated, and then we'll lift it up. And when you lay your design on, it magically lays back down to the paper. So now it's completely flat, and then it will be much easier for me to put the mask on. All right, I've got my design here. I've got my mask. I'm going to take off just a little bit of it. All right, we'll stick it onto here. Here we go, and then we'll take our squeegee and rub it on. Then we'll be able to just peel the backing off. And now we're ready to press our design. Okay, we've got our 100% cotton shirt here. I'm gonna go ahead and place it in the press. And we're gonna do a pre-press for a few seconds, 3-5 seconds. And we will open it back up. Then we will take our design here. Let me find the center real quick. Let's find the center. Okay, and then we're going to cover it with a Teflon sheet. And we are pressing it at 310 degrees for 15 seconds. It's actually a pretty quick press, so that is nice. If you cover it with the Teflon sheet, it gives you a little bit of a shinier finish. If you cover it with the parchment paper, it gives you more of a flat finish. And now it's finished. Let's get our Teflon sheet. And then we go ahead and peel off the paper. And here is our design with our 100% cotton and DTV. Now it's time to do the sublimation. And just in case you're wondering why I used my Sawgrass 1000 and printed it much bigger than it needed to be, it's because I'm out of 8.5 by 11 paper. No special reason. So I just cut it down. But then with sublimation, it is a very good idea to tear the sides so that you don't have a box, like straight lines all around your design when you actually press it. So trimming or tearing the sides gets rid of those press lines, which are annoying once you've got this beautiful t-shirt and then you've got a box around it. So I recommend tearing. All right, so here's our design here. I've torn the sides. We're ready to press. I've got my blowout paper and my 100% polyester shirt. You want to make sure that you get your paper on the inside as well as the outside of your shirt, because sometimes the ink from your project can bleed through to the back of your shirt. So you always want to protect your garment on the inside. So you need 2 pieces of the butcher paper. Okay, let's push this in. Find the center. Let's see, I need a little light. Here we go. All right, and then we'll put this on our shirt. Make sure I am on the paper. I am. And then I need my heat tape. Gotta have the heat tape so that you do not have shifting in your paper, because then you're gonna get the ghosting. Ghosting is never fun. Spend all this time making this cool design. It's ready to be pressed, and then you take it out of your heat press and you see that there's 2 of your design. But not really like a nice 2 of your design. It looks messed up. It's not good. Now we're gonna put our paper on the top as well. Get that collar in. We want to make sure we've got even pressure, so I don't want that collar blocking the top of my design from getting heat on it. So I push it back and make sure the collar is not on the press. I'm now at 400 degrees for 40 seconds as opposed to the 310 for the DTV. Here we go. We're pressing that for 40 seconds, and then we get to compare what the 2 designs look like on the shirt. And we're gonna see how much brighter this sublimation design is from the print that we printed out. All right, we've got 5 seconds left with this one. Let's open it up and see what we get. The reveal is always fun with sublimation. Okie dokie, let's take our paper out. So here is this one, Take Me to the Beach. So I'm sure you want to see both of them together. So here are the shirts side by side. Let's come in a little closer. That one is much brighter than this one, and the colors are actually just a little bit different. So you can see, using my sublimation printer and then using my regular Epson printer, They're just a little bit different, but I feel like they are both very nice end results. This one you can see, you can hear a little something on that design. With this one, there's nothing. It's just the t-shirt material. So that's another difference between the DTV and the Sublimation. So now the wash test. I know you guys want to see how this DTV holds up in the wash, how the Sublimation print holds up in the wash. So I am not going to wash them for 24 hours. That's the recommendation. And I'm going to do as many washes as I can. And I'm going to come back on here and show y'all what they did. So stay tuned. Okay, I am back. I have washed both of the shirts 10 times, washed and dried. So here is our result from the washing. This is our shirt that we did the sublimation. So this is the 100% polyester shirt. And then this is the shirt that has the DTV. It definitely shows a little more wear than the Sublimation shirt. It's got a little bit of a wrinkly texture. Let me give you a closer look. So here's the DTV. You'll see there's a little bit of wrinkling on some of the parts, but there is nothing that has come off, nothing that has peeled away. There is no cracking. So that's the DTV. And then here's the Sublimation. And there really is no difference between what we started with and what we have now after 10 washes. And again, like I showed you before, you can hear that there's something there on the shirt, and with the Sublimation, you don't hear anything. So that's the difference between the two shirts, but I think they both held up really well. If you really don't like the kind of wrinkled effect that the DTV has, you can just throw it back under the press for just a few seconds, or even use an iron. So I'm just going to show you what that does to it. Make sure you cover it up. You definitely don't want to put it on there with nothing. We'll close that, and we'll just do it just for a few seconds, and that will take some of the wrinkles out. So it's got a little bit of a smoother texture, not as many of the wrinkles that we had there before. So that's always an option for you as well. Well, thank you so much for watching my video today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about the difference between DTV and Sublimation. They're both very good techniques to use when you're making your t-shirts, and I think they both offer a little bit something different because Sublimation has some limitations when you're working with different materials, and the DTV does not have any fabric limitations. So that's one thing, like if you're kind of stuck and you want to use a cotton shirt, the DTV would be a nice option. And you see that it actually holds up really well in the wash. So I think it's a good option for you, and I would recommend it. Hopefully you're following me on some of my other social channels. I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and I look forward to talking with you in the future. See ya, stay crafty, my friends.